Welcome to The Truth in His Heart. Thank you for tuning into my conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. I am your host, Rob Lee. Today, I am super excited to be joined by my next guest, a renowned and award-winning jazz vocalist, pianist, educator, and activist. My guest serves as executive director of the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, where he oversees the commission's efforts to support and promote the arts in the District of Columbia. Please welcome Aaron Myers II. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And I'm a little jealous right now. Like, I feel like you're more blazed up than me. You got we got this video thing. You got yours tightened up. I got a line of mine. I didn't go to the barbershop today. So I'm a little annoyed by that.
Well, I do it really myself, but it's like a daily thing. So I remember seeing my grandfather, shave almost daily. And I try to do the same thing. I can't help it,
I dig it. It's like that bit from that movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. He's just like, you think this is unintentional? He's like, no.
Right. I'm just graying more than I would have liked, I would say. I'm starting to gray more.
As this grows out, I see a few on the sides. Yeah. Like, look.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
So again, thank you for making the time to come on. And generally, when I do these intros, it's an artist statement. It's sort of one of these online pieces, the kind of cut and paste thing. And I find that often something is missing. I'll interview folks and I'm like, yeah, you're on as a musician. You're on as a director of this. And they're like, I box too, right? I do all of these other things. So I want to give you the space before we get into the larger questions to introduce yourself in your own words, what have you. So if you will, give us a little, dose of who Aaron Myers is.
Well, I always like, when I truncate it, I like to say, I am an artist with a government job now, From my artistry, I'm a jazz artist by trade, but I've written both for the stage and for screen, and I've written 2 books. I am a recording artist, that is, and the work that I do has been centered around advocacy. A great number of years. And I say that selfishly because the advocacy I've done are things that personally touch me and would be improved if the world was more aware around mental health, LGBTQ rights, and artist rights, of course. And then as far as, the 9 to 5, there are 2 primary jobs. I've been on April 6th, I will have celebrated 14 years as the minister of music at Covenant Baptist, UCC. It's a predominantly African-American, civil rights-led, open and affirming, fully inclusive church here in the nation's capital. And I am the executive director of the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, which is a state art agency of the District of Columbia. From a volunteer standpoint, of course, I'm on the board of directors for some nonprofits that, of course, centered around the things that I care about, such as Crittenton Services of Greater Washington, 135-year-old organization that is centered around teen girls and the work and the support that they need, and celebrating the lessons they can teach us, as well as on the executive committee with the NAACP here in Washington, and I'm on the board of governors for the DC chapter of the Recording Academy.
So you're doing it all, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm happy. I got to tell an Uber driver the other day that, asking about what do you do for fun? And I'm like, I'm living what I do for fun. I love doing my artistry. I love doing my advocacy. I love being influential in my policy work. And then I love being able to give back in a meaningful way. And so I happen to be able to do all of these things.
It's wonderful. And thank you. That's, when we have a full plate and we're in all of these different areas, whether it be sort of our own creative fulfillment, our professional fulfillment, what is feeding us and putting a roof over our heads, and what is satisfying our souls. It's long days, and being able to balance all of those things. I definitely relate to it. And, going back and forth to DC, going to Philly, going to these different places and riding that wave of ambition. And it's all driven by sort of the creative thing and, trying to do right by the things that matter to me, helping folks get their word out, because often it's underrepresented or unrepresented folks that I'm speaking to, and folks that I think can move the needle as far as like artistry and whose stories matter.
Right.
So going back a little bit, this is sort of the part B to that initial question. Could you share a bit about your upbringing? I see Texas, and and ways that perhaps that upbringing has informed how you go about your work professionally, artistically, and from an activism standpoint.
Well, I was raised predominantly in a sharecropping community called Goodloe, Texas. And that's 60 miles south of Dallas, about 14 miles east. And it was a city that was predominantly made up of the descendants of either grandchildren and children of former slaves, and sharecroppers as well, of course, a laboring community. And from there, I was able to be supported in a great way by the people there, the church. And I got to see how community-minded my family was. Mm. And so, like, a perfect example, my grandparents had about a half an acre behind their house in a lot. And on that lot, they would plant a garden every year. And with that garden, they made it free. They never charged to get it planted. And the rule was you just come and get what you need. Don't take too much, just to get what you need, and leave some for other people who may want to go out there and get them some greens or some what have you they had out there, And so that was something that I, grew up just seeing, that you're supposed to care for your community. My grandmother, we would see who was on the sick and shut-in list at church. And then during the week, my grandmother would walk that community and go through and see people. And some people may need some cleaning or some sewing or some cooking or whatever. You take this down to so-and-so, they may need this. And that's just what you do. Or when someone's getting ready to go to college, or they were going to college, we take up a whole collection at church. And we would, it was just part of what you do. And I have not changed. I don't know what in society and what in the world changed, but, when you see people who are in need, who need support, and you have the wherewithal to offer some support, you do it if you can. If you see someone who is doing good things and is striving to be better. I remember when I first went to Hollywood, my grandmother would send me care packages. And sometimes she didn't realize it. That was what I was going to eat the next week, because right. You're unemployed actor or artist in LA. That's what happens. I remember when we would either make it on the honor roll, or when I got elected class president. There was an announcement made in church, and people clapped and supported us. And I think some of the earliest public performances I did were to honor members of the community or for the NAACP. And so I watched my mother operate in activism. My uncle was an alderman. My cousin was the president of the chapter of the NAACP for our county. And I watched them do it as a part of just, this is what we do. And this is what you're supposed to do, and do it. And so it's all I've known my life to be. So my life starting out was, as I look back, seeing, how the adults then, who are my age now, did everything they could to make it as pleasant for the young people coming up, despite the racial, the racism and the economic constraints that they were under because of their race and the region and the state they lived in. Yeah.
It's almost like you'd know, but it wouldn't, I would imagine it wouldn't really prevent you from having, like, these are the confines, so let's work within the confines to do the best that we can do with what we have. And, I remember, we grew up in the projects, right? Like here in Baltimore. And I just remember my brother and I, we were kind of reminisce on it. It's like, man, were we really broke? It's like, nah, parents never let us know that. It's just like, hey, get up, go to school, do your stuff. And at that time, I wanted to be an illustrator. So it's just like, hey, you got all of the books, you got all of the materials, here's all the after school programs, whatever we want you to, whatever you want to get in and want to pursue from a creative standpoint, from a scholastic standpoint, we're going to do our best to make sure you get in there. So looking at it now, approaching 40, I'm like, oh, wow, they were making sacrifices. This was a challenge. And, seeing it with that context, it's eye-opening. It's eye-opening.
Yes. Yes. And grateful for it too. I distinctly remember when my mother turned 40. I remember when my mother turned 40 and what she was managing. And I'm now 40, in my 40s, I'm like, how on earth was that woman doing all of this? This is wild, but she did,
Right.
but it was a different time. And I cannot stress that 40 today is not 40 then.
Right.
Resources then are not resources today.
100%.
You're not competing for certain levels of attention, regardless of what that attention is, that then as you are competing for it today. So the goalposts are different. I must say that. But but I'm still in awe of what my mother and those adults did.
That's great. So I want to shift gears a touch towards, your multifaceted creative interests. Like, you got the writing. You said acting in there as well, and obviously, being a musician. So could you speak on, what like aspects of any of the creative process, like, you kind of pick dealer's choice here, but which aspects of those creative process, whether it be like, all right, I got this idea, or, you know what, I want to do this album. This is the direction I want to go in. These are, sort of like the compositions I want to work in, the writing I want to do. What brings you the most satisfaction creatively? What brings you like sort of the most gets those grades kind of popping a little bit more? What's the most challenging, if you will?
Well, I've told people, I said that, artists, I'm an artist first. So as an artist, I'm not bound by discipline, which is a fun thing I like to think. But what's wild is that, we artists are the only people who can close their eyes and see visions of things that have never happened before, can, be in a silent room and hear tons of music that's never been composed before, or in a quiet space or in a loud space, have an entire play, musical, what have you, drumming in their heads, that could be either seen on the pages of a book or on the stages or on the screen. We are crazy. The what separates us from being completely, out there is that we dare to make it real in some way. We dare to take that idea from a music perspective for this inference and sit at a piano or whatever instrument, for me it's the piano, and try to put in real terms what I'm hearing internally. And then taking a chance on if the music that I put out would possibly resonate with someone else.
Yeah.
That's a daring thing to do. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't do is that I'm surrounded by now a great deal is visual art. And I think how amazing it is for someone to, it's one thing to capture a picture, but to paint one. Who would have known that when the Mona Lisa had been created, that we would see versions of that hundreds of years later still referenced in a sense, or when Andy Warhol would do it as Basquiat. I mean, who would have known that they would be still household names today?
Right.
No one would. They would have not known, but they dared to make real what they had seen in their minds. I think it's absolutely amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah. The daring piece of it is something like, I'll share this. This is the closest thing. I have minimal musical talent.
Okay.
I always sit there like, okay, I can hum this tune. It's like Pharrell and Chad Hugo ideating. It's like, yeah, we're going to do this. Let me just knock this beat around.
Right.
And I remember it was a podcast listening party, and I'm sitting there, and apparently I have a distinct voice. I only have the voice that I have, right?
Right.
But I'm sitting there for this sort of listening party at this like really like hipstery like hotel setup. It was really nice, really cool. And I'm just sitting there, and the folks think that, oh yeah, you're just here for the listening party. And I'm getting that sort of like real life feedback. And I'm like, oh, that was cringe. Oh, I do remember saying that. I said, here. And really just all of the sort of like ick and the creative thing, but then also feeling that sense of pride. Like, I did this. I think this conversation went well. And, I chime in because the person proctoring it asks me like, so Rob, what do you think about the podcast you just listened to? And I was like, well, because I'm in it. They're like, you're the Rob guy. And I was like, yeah, I am. And then getting that sort of like real life feedback, and something I said that was so goofy and so corny about, it was a gem that the guest dropped. And I was like, man, I'm eating that up like caramel. And I just laughing at it. And I was like, okay, this affects and this hit in these ways. And I don't know, it was just something really cool about it. And it's like being there in front of an audience that doesn't quite know that this is work that you did and you put time and energy into.
All the time. It's the time and energy part of it.
Yeah.
That no one, you do hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks of rehearsals for a show that might last 70 minutes or 3 hours at the most.
What do you find to be the most, well, this question is in that same vein, but slightly different. So within the journey, and then we met in person, we chatted it up, and I was talking about how I'm an older statesman, and you're like, well, I actually had a radio show. I'm kidding. But, there are these different like milestones in it that, in this whole like creative journey for me, I suppose. So I want to get your take on it of what has been that period that was like maybe the most rewarding within the journey. Like what was that phase? What was the most informational? What was the most like challenging? Like, hey, starting out was hard, just kind of getting out there, being new to a scene, or maybe a move was, getting working in Russia, as we talked about before. Was that a very rewarding opportunity? What was the most informational? So speak on those like sort of touch points in terms of informational, in terms of rewarding for you, and challenges and the phases of your career as an artist.
Well, I can say I felt the most informed starting out, and this is when I was doing blog talk radio. In a sense, I did something that was not done. I got the blog talk radio. It was called The Exchange online, and I got a website as well. And so every morning at 6 a.m., I had about between a 500 word and 700 word political op-ed that would be posted there.
Sure.
And then throughout the day, I would follow the news. And if there was a press conference, I would report live and have it published on the website. And then that would be either political news or something within pop culture, in a sense. And then I did the daily Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. for the first 2 years. And then it was at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time the third year. I did a daily Monday through Friday radio show, a blog talk radio show. And I never felt more informed because I was plugged into the news in real time every day. And I was at the movie theater when I got a cryptic message that alluded that Michael Jackson had died. And I was with a girl. We were watching, I think, Transformers or something that day. And so I said, I've got to get home to my computer because I think Michael Jackson has just died. And we were going back, and you could see the rumors starting. And I was trying to get my article up, and I thought about, I think the next day or so, when they were trying to figure out arrangements or whatever. And I knew that if you did not know Los Angeles, it'd be easy for you to say, just simply call it the Staples Center, right?
Yeah.
The Staples Center, right?
Right.
And so I spelled it the Staples Center because that's what most people would be Googling. And then the Google would offer the correction. But at that time, you had Google AdSense. And that's what got the highest thing. And you went straight to me,
Right.
Ironically, what it kept me up, the reason I went to the movie, because I stayed up the night before writing the obituary, because it was said that I believe Goldie Hawn Farrah Fawcett, that's what it was. Farrah Fawcett was dying. She had, I think, colorectal cancer.
Yes.
So she died, and I published her obituary on the site that Charlie just lost. Heaven just gained an angel or something of that nature. And that had gone. And then I'd gone, rested, and then I went to the movies and then came right back home and
right.
got Michael Jackson. So that's when I felt most informed. It was during that process of talking to, people who were getting new shows that were coming up on television. I got to interview Jessie. Was it Jessie Jane? What's the girl's name? She's a vocalist. That's how I got to interview Twitch and Allison.
Yeah.
That's before he got on Ellen.
Right.
All these people were right there. The only Black person to co-star with Betty Davis, independent candidate for president. All these people are on the show,
Right.
And John Fugelsang. This is just wild. The most challenging was probably the tour that I did in Russia. Not the first one, just, I did 24 shows in 20 cities and 19 flights in 6 weeks. That was difficult. But being in Russia when the invasion happened and having no assistance in getting back outside of the people who were thousands of miles away from me, no one in Russia was helping me get back home. And I had to sneak out and use my intuition to rise above that, because if I did not, I would possibly be still there today. And so trying to navigate not being a tool and not being used for leverage for other things was something that I had to do. And I did. I was able to get out. That was probably the most stressful. The most, I think, eye-opening thing I had to realize as I got older was understand and accept that success from a monetary standpoint and from an accolade standpoint will happen if it happens in its own time and way, and it will not be controlled by me, no matter how much I try to control it. And I have to be okay with that if I want to continue with this. The most painful thing was realizing the amount of time sacrificed away from loved ones toward this pursuit that will never be returned. And when they're gone, they're gone.
Right.
So that's been about the roundabout way.
Thank you. And I think, definitely a lot of what we've talked about thus far is going to resonate with so many different people. I'm sitting back here thinking about it with your like a preacher voice. I'm thinking about it's resonating, and and thinking about doing this and thinking about sort of the hours and the time that goes in, as my parents are getting older, what have you, thinking about those considerations, and when these opportunities present themselves. And definitely the thing you said around, like, I guess, how we quantify success, whether it be monetarily, whether it be through accolades, I had to try to, and I still struggle with it, but accept that the universe is going to sort it out. All I'm really responsible for is just doing the thing that I can do with the information that I have, the resources, the time, all of that different stuff, and just try to be good, however I define that. And just sticking with it. And, all of those other things, what I may see value in, or I suppose what you may see value in, of like, am I doing good? Some people look at it as still making work. So that's, or when someone's like, I'm a working actor. Well, you never had a blockbuster. I'm a working actor. That's success for me. And that's the way that I'm kind of looking at this. Like, I'm 700 plus episodes in. And
that's right.
People don't seem to dislike me yet. So that's cool. That's a win for me. It's a low bar.
I will never forget, I was in Hollywood and I was having brunch with an old, what they would call contract player years and years ago. Her name was Carol Brewster. What was her name? And she was a woman who, she even kept her headshots with her at all time, just in case, you never knew. And I talked to her about taking elocution lessons because of my voice. I wanted to have a more American, Midwestern, you can't pinpoint voice, And I had done a voiceover audition for a video game, and the guy said I didn't sound black enough, or I didn't sound like the type of black person they were looking for. And it just got in my head so badly. And so I went I was going to go to these classes. And she said, you know what? What does James Earl Jones and Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington all really have in common? I said, I don't know. She said, well, Hollywood and the world had never heard those voices until they were here, and they were on film, and you could, see them. And she said, Hollywood will take a lot of things from you, but don't let it take your voice. And that resonated with me in so many different ways, and I've maintained it. It's stayed with me. And people would make sly remarks, Southern, where are you from? I know you're from the country, or from this, that, and the other. Especially being in Washington, as if Washingtonians don't have accents, or Baltimoreans, don't have accents, or whatever, But I maintained it because this city, whatever city you're in, whatever metropolitan, whatever industry you're in, it has the potential to take many things away from you. But you have the power to not allow those things and those arenas not to take away your voice. So that's what I hung on to.
That's great. And it's funny you mentioned that. I just had this situation on the past week. I've been kind of like slowly going back into the community, doing sort of the social things, being out there, pressing the flesh, as it were. And there was a DC person. She was like, where are you from? I was like, from Baltimore. And she was like, so when did you leave Baltimore? I was like, I've been here the whole time. I've never left, all 39 years. And she was like, I don't hear the accent. I was just like, I don't know what you're saying. And I said something. I was like, I got two. And she was like, okay, I heard it right there. I was like, I told you I'm from here. The two is there, the TEW. But generally, that's the thing that I always hear. You don't sound like us. I'm like, I'm from here. I'm from the East Side. Like, what are you? I don't know. But, and when it's on two sides of it, where when the sort of pop culture thing happens, when there's maybe a TV show or something, do the accent. No, I'm not doing that. That's not what I sound like. Or can you suppress the accent when it does pop out? It's like, this is just me being normal, me being authentic. And that's what I try to live in. And that's a really, really good gem there. So I got sort of like two more real questions around music, and I definitely want to talk about DC Commission on the Arts and the Humanities. But so musically, what are your greatest like sources of like inspiration or what have you, greatest sources of inspiration as it relates to music? Like who did you listen to? Like who did you like? What are the themes that you're pursuing?
Well, I grew up in the church, so I grew up listening to, the original, I would say the king of gospel, would be James Cleveland, and then the father of gospel, Thomas Dorsey. And then I grew up, of course, in the 80s and in the 90s and watched, gospel transcend. We were already being nurtured and formed by Walter Hawkins and the Andre Crouches of the world and this, that, and the other. And in the small area that I come from, you think of a Chitlin circuit, there was also a kind of a gospel Chitlin circuit. And so you had people like Dorothy Lovecoats and the Harmonettes and those types of people who had gone through that region of Texas in the 50s and 60s. And the music that they had sung on their concert tour, in a sense, was still being sung when I was growing up, in a sense. It permeated. They took that as part of their liturgy. And so naturally, I heard that. But then also, I was a fan of band music, because, band music was that was the option I had to go to in school. And so I was in a band captain and all that good stuff. But then on television, I was surrounded by a great deal of jazz because all the commercials and all the television shows, I liked old television shows. And so all the television shows had great jazz and great orchestrations, and Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers was filled with great jazz and music. And so so those three things coming together kind of made an appreciation. My mother had, milk crates of records from when she had been in college. So everything from the Funkadelics to the Whispers and to whomever you can imagine, they were all there. And you find yourself listening to that stuff on the record player. I had a spoon full of, not spoon, what is it called? A spool of 45s that I was listening to. So I got to listen to the Peggy Lee and Dinah Washingtons and all that good stuff, and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and all that. And of course, I fell in love with Aretha Franklin and Patti LaBelle. Those two just amazed me. So all of those things informed me musically. Yeah. And so I had to understand who I was as an artist. And so, gospel is my heart. This is where I feel the most safe. Jazz is my job. This is what I love to do, and with the profession I love. And I love to listen and have an input on every other genre you can imagine. Country, not so much. There's some good country, but when I think of country music, I automatically think of Southern white gospel music. I think of the Grand Ole Opera, and I think of, Vestal Goodman and the Happy Goodmans and Dottie Rambo and all of those people, from that side. But, when it comes to my creativity draws from all of those influences, period. And as I'm writing, I might write something that you think could have been written 60 years, 70 years ago, and as jazz band, or I could write something that my contemporaries can feel like it came out as an R&B type style today. I like jazz because jazz gives me that breath of freedom, because it's influenced every genre of music, including gospel. So the gospel that we now know, the form of the foxtrot or the blues, in a sense, was informed by Professor Thomas A. Dorsey, and even many of the quartets and the girl groups that were mirroring, and they were being influenced, of course, by the quartets and the girl groups of their time as well. They just did over in gospel. So, yeah,
that's great. And you get sort of that, and I definitely clicked when you mentioned sort of like getting those records that were around the house or what have you. And I look back at what's in the crib. Like I'm very considerate about what I bring into my home, right? I only have jazz records in my home. And I remember growing up, my dad would just put it on as like WEAA 88.9, Morgan. I'm like, man, turn that off, man. Where's the hip hop? And he's like, you're going to eventually appreciate this. And, all right. And then ironically, every record that I own, maybe exception of like 2 are jazz records. And so that's what's there as far as like, I'm putting this on with intention, whereas I'm just listening to something to, just have it going. It's essentially my mom's taste in music, which is just 80s pop music, just everywhere. And I would just see those sort of like family influences, and to bring it sort of full circle, like last week, to extend, I guess, this sort of wave of I'm doing things that I like. I was like, I want to revisit this one musician. Like I like freestyle music. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't think anybody talks about Shannon anymore, let the music play and all of that. So I put together, like, here's this sort of, pilot radio show of me revisiting these tracks. I was like, I like it. I'm sure I'm going to find people who are digging it as well. And that, looking at the sort of root of it all goes back to, this is almost a, testament or an acknowledgement of my mom's music taste that kind of came down to me through what she was listening to when I was a baby. So yeah,
you find yourself, you don't realize how that music is feeding you, because it's feeding a part of you that will. I view it kind of like when you see the little squirrels taking little nuts and putting them in their little secret place, and that winter period, you'll have something to eat off of. And I think that we get those little nuggets that inform us so that when we become grown-ups, in a sense, we have things that feed us, because the same, NSYNC from when I was growing up was not going to feed me some of the issues that I'm going through today. That was not going to, nothing against NSYNC,
Right,
or Justin Bieber or the rest of the B2K-ish. They were a little bit behind me, unfortunately. But I'm not going to any of that. I'm going literally to that old gospel of some of the things that I remember. I was listening to. I just went through a breakup, and Candy Staton, was it Young Hearts Run Free? Da 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 da. Oh, Young Hearts Run Free. That's that song. I played that on repeat. Yeah. Mind you, in my car. I was like, what, Aaron? Crying to a song that was 40 years old, more than likely. And I was like, what is this? Because she hit the nail, she hit the nail on the head with that particular music. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just think of that. You're storing up those nuts, and they really do feed you when you get older in those little periods,
Music's a time capsule. I mean, having a breakup, and I just remember just on loop, just the impressions the entire time. And I'm like, oh, man, it's like, where's my pomade? I just need to.
Yes.
But yeah, it's definitely that, and your notion around like it feeding you. It's real. It's real, and it definitely has an impact on one's mood and your mindset. And before I move into the sort of next chunk, it's definitely. You hit the gym or what have you, have a certain playlist. You're in the mood for like just, good energy, good calm energy. You're playing a certain thing. Or even me, I have trouble sleeping. So I put on like, sort of the binaural beats or what have you. And it's just sort of this ambient.
I can't listen to music to go to sleep. My mind will go. I don't see how anyone who can sleep to music, because, even the most calming, the Zen music is so complex. And I'm laying down like, oh, how did they do? Oh, that's a bad. Let me get right to this real quick. This could be a good song or whatever. I have to sleep to rain sounds. Yeah, it has to be nature. Rain. That's the only. I have to rest. I have to rest to that. Which is crazy.
I like you activated as a musician. I was like, no, I have to wreck to this.
Literally, you laying there like, oh, that is bad. Like sometimes when I'll go to get a massage or something, they're playing the Zen music, and I'm like, how am I to be calm to this? Because they're doing some fire things right now on this track. Who is this? Like, because it's world music. They listen to a lot of world music. That people. I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Who is the artist I'm voting? That kind of thing.
That's great. So I got two more real questions, and definitely I want to dive into, your role as ED of the DC Commissions on the Arts and Humanities. So, could you talk a bit about like sort of your role and what your like goals and like sort of your focus is in your role, and sort of like, for those who are undipped, unfamiliar, like what is the role that the commission largely has around like the arts culture in the District of Columbia?
And every state has what they call a state art agency.
Sure.
It's an agency that is informing the government upon, the state of art, what's happening with art around the district, how art is used, can be used in economic development, infrastructure, the whole nine. People forget those who participate in the creative economy. They are taxpayers, they're constituents, and they must be accounted for in some type of way. And it's the goal of every state or municipality to nurture that industry as it would nurture an IT industry, as it would nurture a service industry, what have you, and to create certain policies and grants that would spark and innovate, right? So that we can see a better ROI. And so that's what the State Art Agency of Washington, D.C. does. I mean, I think per capita, we may lead the nation in the amount of money that we give to individual artists. I think we come in third in budget size to New York and Minnesota, perhaps, believe it or not. And so, and of the 56 state art agencies that cover all the states and territories, I think there are 2 African-American executive directors, and I'm one of them. right? The other one is in Massachusetts, Michael Bobbitt. And I know Puerto Rico has a lot to Next Man, and then Guam, and so each, but I think two are Black, if I'm not mistaken. And so the role that we play here in Washington, I mean, if you drive through DC, out of the murals that you may see on the side of buildings, the plays and theater you may see advertised, and even some of the music you may hear coming out of radio stations and our cars on the street could be a commission-funded project. And the reason why I say it like that is that our grants range from projects, events, and festivals that are put on by individuals or organizations to the public art, the statues, the murals that you might see out in the public, to individual fellowships where artists themselves get money to help live and survive and to navigate Washington D.C. From an unrestricted side. Sure. So that's what the agency does. I mean, that we are our statute, and we're mandated to give out at least 80% of our budget out to the community through grants, which is an amazing thing. And so we have partnerships and throughout the city through our grants, and then also through some of the partnerships we've done with our fellow agencies to help support things like, Pride Month and Asian Pacific Islander Month. And then, of course, women, this is, March was Women's History Month, so you have the Mayor's Office of Women Policy Initiatives. We've supported them as well. So, I mean, there's a myriad of different things that we do throughout the city. And our goal is to ensure that we are being the chief stewards of the infrastructure of the creative economy when it comes to supporting the arts and promoting the arts as mandated by the council. My job as probably the first performing artist in this position is to be nothing but an interpreter, for myself to interpret to government what people on the ground have been experiencing and the impact of these programs that we come out, how effective are they? And then for me to interpret also to my colleagues who are out in the field on the urgency of now, how to communicate their wants and needs to take advantage of certain opportunities the city's trying to put out there.
It's big, important work. And, with what I'm doing, I'm glad that we were able to connect because, and coming down there, I see it. And then, being from there, it's always this sort of Baltimore versus DC thing. And I'm like, let's explore, let's see what's there. And, being able to, be brought in and be embraced by different pockets of sort of that creative economy, like sort of the DC radio thing stuff is on my podcast is on there regularly. And they look at me like, yeah, you're like the cousin, you don't have the accent, you don't like the mambo sauce, what have you, but it's all good. It's all good. I like the mambo sauce. It's fine. But yeah. Definitely sort of one of those things. And what I aspire and what I aim to do is I see it as simple as let's connect these communities, Right. There are people that look like me and you. Let's connect the people in those communities because it's down the street, and then, trying to extend that pipeline, the Baltimore, DC, Philadelphia sort of like pipeline or whatever. That's what I'm aiming for and doing it very intentionally and doing it like this is what I feel makes sense. This is what I feel is connected and extending that conversation as broad and as wide as it can be because there's good work everywhere. You just have to look for it, as I did my tagline.
And right now, like we are involved with this music census that we're doing. And we're over the next 2 years, the District of Columbia is engaging in a series of surveys and censuses so that we will no longer anecdotally have to speak about what these disciplines and populations look like. We will have some facts to back some things up to help us understand how to offer support. Mostly for me, I want to do it as a model for other states and municipalities so they can adopt the same principles,
Sounds innovative. I love it. So I got one more real question, and it goes a little something like this. I always try to like close out on some sort of like really intentional gem. And how have those like, serendipitous moments or those chance encounters played a role in shaping your career? You'll hear like, yeah, I came across this person and I was discovered and he cast me in this movie. Or back in the day, I passed this person my CD and turns out he was a record executive and now I'm blowing up. So speak a bit about those, serendipitous moments and sort of what advice would you give to someone that's an aspiring artist, regardless of discipline, obviously, to help them navigate and capitalize on what might look like something maybe not worthwhile?
Those serendipitous moments, or those by chance meetings, I view them a little differently because when you grow up in a community of only 312 people and a area, geographical location that some would see to be racially oppressive and economically depressive, those serendipitous moments for me are surreal, and they are a moment to remind myself that I'm honoring the contract or the understanding between myself and my family, that we are sacrificing this time together because they believe that the art that I carry within me should be shared, can be shared, the talent can be improved upon and developed and cultivated, and it can reap us and support us. So being able to be in a place where I'm able to have Patty LaBelle tell my mom happy birthday or something. Those are amazing things to see people that you. The first, I was going to put out a gospel project as the music supervisor of a Christian film. It was a Black gospel film. This is in 2005, I think. This is like years ago, almost 20 years ago. And as we were listening to the rough cuts, in 1 week, I had Walter Hawkins, Andre Crouch, and Smokey Norfolk to hear the rough cuts of that. And I didn't get them to hear it by chance. I had both Walter and Smokey in the car with me, and we listened to it in, I believe Andre Crouch had may have been a black Rolls Royce, listened to it in his car, or what have you. I think that was amazing to be able, last year, to go up to Dr. Fauci and tell him thank you for all the work he did, and to know it was heartfelt and heart meant, to sit down at the Grammys and open up the program and to have my mom there with me and to point to my name that's in the program as one of the governors for the DC chapter, as we're celebrating the 50th year of hip hop, and my mom's grooving next to me. I mean, that's amazing. Yes. These are moments and touch points. To throw a party, to do an event in support of the Grammys for Grammy members, and to be in line later that night with people who were there but may not have recognized you and said, DC did it best. Knowing that was your party, that was your event, to be in the grocery store and have someone stop and say, I just saw your visual album on television and is completely inspiring, or for a friend to fly from Oregon to see her family in Baltimore and get to her hotel, turn on the television, and there I am. Those are amazing moments. Or for me to be able to call people who I've listened to for years and loved, or contemporaries who are Grammy Award winners, who I can text and who know me and who think of me in certain moments, and I think of them. Those moments mean the world. And I say all that to say, I've learned over my short time here on Earth that the most impactful thing you can do is create a relationship with people. I don't want to collect people.
Yeah.
There are people of great influence, both locally and nationally, and some globally, that I have zero relationship with, don't desire to have it. We don't share value sets.
Yeah.
But there are some people who have great influence locally, nationally, and globally, who I can call on the phone and say, "Hey, girl, what's going on?" You know, and it doesn't require a post on Instagram or Facebook. It doesn't require it to be documented when someone calls you and says, "I'm sad, I'm down. Can I talk to you for a moment? I don't know what to do in this particular moment." You know, friends, people who you can develop. You can't make new friends, new old friends. You can only invest in relationships with people. And through serendipity, I've been able to, be on break during a jazz show, see an older white couple walk by, invite them into the show. And as years progress, I serve on the board of directors of that organization that she at that time led. Years progress, I was the interim president of that organization that she led. And we've been able to, not only vacation together, but, share some amazing and wonderful moments with one another that have been special and have friendships, and her name is Pam Jones. And I say this because she and I chat about this quite often. When we're out, one would say networking and at parties and this, that, and the other and all that, and that's a DC thing to do. I think that we're poor with it because when we go out, we ask, "How are you?" Not "What do you do?"
I love it.
Are you enjoying yourself? Not "Why are you here?"
Yeah.
We collect the cards of the people who are doing some of the serving and security and that kind of stuff. Because I've learned that if everything is transactional, mind you, there's not an endless source. And at some point, somebody is not going to need you, or you may not need someone else. Well, in relationships, there's not a demand for a need. The relationship means that we're here, and I may not talk to you for 3 or 4 months, but when we pick up the phone, it's like we just talked yesterday.
Right.
When I walk in the room, I smile, because your presence has made me smile, regardless of what you have to offer me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where I live, So that's where serendipity. I have met some people who become dear friends through complete serendipity. Some can consider famous, and some of them are famous to me.
Yeah.
None of it. I'm famous to people, and some other people think I'm famous, but nobody thinks I'm famous but my mama.
I'll thank you. And we're on the same page because I've talked about it actually a few times over the last few weeks. I was like, man, I went down there, I set up meeting with Aaron Myers, and I was just talking, and I was just like, we don't even do that anymore. And I started thinking of it, just the notion of setting a meeting a person, having a conversation with them. It's like, hey, I do this thing, and not going in there with sort of the intent that I'm going to need something, because I've had those things before, being on both sides of it. And, I get inspired and I read these different books around sort of navigating creativity, the creative economy, art, all of that different stuff. And one of the quotes I think that's out of maybe Still Like an Artist. I think it's Still Like an Artist. It's like, I'm just looking for friends. That's literally what it is. And some of those are relationships that extend and are really cool, and others aren't quite that. And I'll say this, I have a friend who moved out of this region and moved to like Puerto Rico, and comes in, occasionally, maybe quarterly, to do a show. They have work that's being shown, and I make it a point to go visit, regardless of what I have. It's like, you were really cool with me. You've been on this pod. You've done these other things, and one of the times where I had to go out there and do this little public speaking thing. I usually have the glass in front of me, the computer screen. It's protective. But going out there in this sort of nervous but very transformative period for me of sharing my story in like front of one of the largest audiences I ever had. And she was there and very just supportive of me. I was like, I got to support whatever you do. I was just like, I'm going to be there for it. I'm going to show up for it. And not everyone gets that. And it's, 700 plus interviews. Everyone's not a friend, but the ones that connect and you have that sort of kinship, those are the things. Mm-hmm. I never knew we were going to be cool and have the same movie tastes and things of that nature. And that's just what it is. So definitely I'm on that page. It's like value those things, value those connections. And everything's not a transaction. Yeah. So I want to move into like the rapid fire questions in these last moments here before we close out. I got 4 of them for you. And, as I tell everybody, don't overthink them. Don't overthink them, So I'm gonna start off with the easy thing. What was the last movie you watched?
It was a documentary about Marian Anderson. It's a PBS American Experience. I think it must have just recently come out. But movie-wise, if you consider a documentary movie, that's the last thing I watched.
If you were to summarize it as one thing, what do you enjoy most about being an artist?
The freedom.
Creatively and professionally, what are 2 truths for you?
I must like me, and not everybody should like me.
That's a real well thought out answer right there.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, this is the one I'm almost expecting some of those Southern roots to come out in this next question. Favorite comfort food?
Child. You say favorite. That's what makes it difficult. Because I can't. Well, I will say a pecan pie. Pecan chess pie. A chess pie. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is. And my roommates will tell you. Anybody who's lived with me over the years, my partners, girlfriends, family, you want to shut me up. If I'm crying, if I'm unconsolable or whatever, just cut me a piece of pecan pie and put a little ice cream on it, and then butter pecan ice cream. If that, and let me have some flavor, I will shut up real quick and get myself together and be fat and happy.
Now I'm going to have to get one. I've never had one. I've never had a slice.
Chess pie. So you have chess pies, and you have a pecan chess pie. You order you a pecan chess pie, and you will understand what life is about.
I love it.
It's better than sex.
I love it. That's a great way to close out.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things I want to do in these final moments. One, I want to thank you so much for coming on, being a part of this podcast. And 2, I want to invite and encourage you to share sort of social media, website, pretty much where folks can get informed about your work and about the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, from a personal standpoint, you can find me. My website is Aaron, AARON, 2.me, so Aaron2.me. My Twitter is Aaron Myers, AARON That shows you how long I've been on there. And my Instagram is Aaron L. Myers. And I guess the other Aaron Myers got me by a day or so because I was pretty quick to get there too. And, all of the organizations I belong to, one can find ranging from Crittenton Services, Covenant Full Potential Development Center, the Recording Academy, of course, of those who are looking to be Grammy members should consider joining, of course, and talking to others. And then as far as the commission, you go to dcarts.dc.gov to learn about grants and things that they offer as well.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Aaron Myers II from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of his journey. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.